to SASA's April Book Club. Today we are joined by A.D. Rhine, aka Danielle and Ashley, who are the authors of Horses of Fire, a novel of Troy. This is the first book of a duology, and the sequel officially publishes this year, right? In November, is that right?
November.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. So today they're going to talk about their book with us. And before we get started, I'm going to go through just a little bit about what SASA is and our mission. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that into the stream. Alrighty. So again, we're talking about Horses of Fire. Okay, so SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance, and our mission is to promote the study of the ancient world and engage with our human deeper pasts, building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship. We work toward a goal of inspiring a wide, inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. And my favorite part, discussing awesome books. You can find us pretty much everywhere. We are on Twitter, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere. So just some normal house rules for our book club. We are streaming to several different platforms. Everybody who is listening, please feel free to post in the comments any questions you have for our authors or for SASA or about the book, anything like that. Just please be respectful and courteous and things like that. And we will be answering questions as they come in. And we'll also hopefully do a Q&A at the end as well. Hopefully we'll have time for that. And then you can become a recurring donor of SASA if you appreciate our mission to bring ancient studies back into the forefront. You can set up recurring donations or one-time donations if this is something that you are also passionate about. And okay, that's it. So we are going to jump into our very first question. First, are you guys in the same geographical location, or have your correspondences been mainly over like social media and stuff? As far as like your collaboration on this piece.
Go ahead, Ashley.
I am in northern Michigan and Danielle is in northern Virginia. So no, we wrote this entire collaboration process happened thanks to Google Docs. So we often say, I don't think, 20, 30 years ago, I don't know if we would have been able to collaborate like this, but yeah, we did it remotely and with a couple meetups, of course.
Of course.
A nice excuse to get away.
The best part.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. All right. So my first question for you guys is, what inspired you to write a retelling of the Iliad? Both of you probably know already, and a lot of people who follow me on social media know that I am obsessed with the Iliad. And so I was really excited to have a retelling finally of the Iliad. So what inspired you guys?
Well, I think we both had our own kind of independent experiences with the Iliad, and I'll let Danielle jump in a minute to talk a little bit about hers. For me, it was mainly as a high school teacher. I taught at a classical school where we spent the entire first fall semester just reading the Iliad. And the kids would get assigned like 10 pages a night, come back in, and we would sit in a circle and discuss it for the entire class. So yes, if you're an Iliad fan, like that is a dream, right? So that was, I think, seeing it through the eyes of young people definitely made me fall in love with it even more. But I think it was our shared background as military brats that inspired the kind of retelling we ended up telling. And one where we really wanted to shine a light on the perspectives of the women and children trapped behind the walls of Troy, having, been children raised with soldier fathers and know what it's like to live on a very small tight-knit community of a military base in a foreign country, for example. We met in Germany when we were 15. And I think maybe the seed that really was planted that inspired Horses of Fire was we both adored the famous farewell scene in book 6 between Hector and Andromache. One that anyone who has ever said goodbye to a loved one before a military deployment can relate to. And I think that's what really stuck with us and made us want to tell the story in our own unique way. The fact that thousands of years after this was composed, there are all these universally human moments that land just as powerfully today and remain timelessly relevant. And that scene in particular also grew into, I guess you could say, what became the central thread of Horses of Fire and Daughters of Bronze. And that was, there's a young servant girl holding Hector and Andromache's son in that scene. And we asked ourselves, who is this girl? Who could she be? And that kind of unleashed a whole new element to this retelling and the relationship between 4 of our characters that definitely begins in the first book and comes to fruition in the second book.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you mentioned Rhea right there. Spoiler alert. But she was one of my favorite characters. Like, actually, my favorite character in the story. So that's awesome that she was inspired by that particular scene, because that is one of my favorite scenes in the book as well. So awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, this is the brilliant part about having a co-author that answers questions so beautifully. And I just have to, well done. For myself, my relationship with the Iliad goes back to like when I was being formed. My dad, it's one of his favorite books, and he read it to my mom when she was pregnant with me. And so if I had been a boy, my name was supposed to be Hector. And so
it's the best.
Goes way, way back. And so one of my earliest memories of my dad is reciting, like, sing to me muses of the rest.
Oh no.
I wanted to bring. Oh no, I'm gone. It's okay. Am I back?
You're back.
You're back.
My answer was so great, you just couldn't hear it. So we're just going to keep going. Yeah.
I think the last part that I caught was that your dad used to read that, and your name was going to be Hector. And then it kind of started getting a little warbly after that. But
that's the important part. We have a love for Hector. We have a love for these characters. And we wanted to, some of our favorite characters like Sarpedon and, Aeneas and all these Ajax the Great, the characters, the ones that even the men, the ones that we were drawn to and that we loved, were the ones that haven't gotten a lot of airtime or consideration in even the recent retellings. And so that's what we wanted to bring to it, in addition to the female perspectives and the perspectives of the children.
I love that about the story, because a lot of retellings, they just focus on like the women's story, which I love because they haven't gotten any screen time really. But I loved how you wove in everyone that was part of Troy and some of the Greeks as well that really didn't get a lot of screen time, men and women. And I loved that. And I was just like, as I was reading Horses of Fire, I was like, how in the world did they keep all of this straight? Like, giving each one of these characters such a unique like character arc, and you guys developed it. And I'm just in awe of what you guys accomplished, because there are so many characters in the Iliad that it's virtually impossible to give them all adequate screen time, but I feel like you guys did it really, really well.
Thank you.
And it's an epic, and so we wanted to make our retelling feel like the epicness of the original. So
yes,
lots of characters.
Tons of characters. So when did you guys know that you wanted to write it together, and what was that process like?
Are you there, Danielle? Oh, she might be.
She might be frozen.
I think I'm back now, but
You're back. Yes.
Yes, you
I
are.
apologize, guys. Yes.
No worries.
Whatever's. I live in the woods-ish, and so you never know what's happening.
You're good now. Go for it.
Okay. Was there a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When did you know you guys wanted to write the story together, and what was that like?
So as Ashley mentioned, we met when we were 15, and we were drawn to each other by our love of these epic stories. I cannot tell you how many times we watched Gladiator, Braveheart together. We would be reading the same books. We spent an entire summer reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy on a couch side by side. Our parents were not really worried about us. Let's just say we were always drawn together by these stories. We both loved writing and wanted to write. And so even as we went and we started writing and pursuing individual publication, we always knew that our ultimate dream was to write something together. And I don't think we ever considered any other story but this one, because it's like, as Ashley said, between the lines of the Iliad is where we felt like our own life experiences would have fallen. And so we thought that we could bring something to that. And so it was decades. And when we were both young mothers, you know, driving our cars around with our children screaming in the background, we would call each other and we would brainstorm, you know, on speakerphone, all these things. And that is over a collection of years, really. The bones of the story were formed. And it wasn't until the pandemic, however, when I think we were trapped and all 6 of our children were either babies or needing home, like at home learning. We were like, oh, now is the perfect time to engage in this massive writing collaborative project. But it ended up being perfect because everything felt very raw and visceral. And I think that all the experiences that we'd had either from our childhood or like my husband, you know, being in the military and all, motherhood, all these experiences that we had gained.
So because I know her so well, I can finish that thought.
Played in.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say she is saying we needed all of those different life experiences to finally to see all these different ages, to go through all these different things, to finally actually be able to sit down and write it together.
Exactly. Now that I'm back, yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. And I mean, it was it was a feverish process. We wrote both Horses and Fire and Daughters of Bronze as one big story, and it took us less than a year of just throwing it. It was so, we put our hearts into it, and it was very, very, very fast because it had been percolating for so long. Yeah.
Wow. Wait, so it took you guys a year to write this?
Probably
for the
less.
first draft.
The first draft of both books was probably 10 months. Mm-hmm. But we spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time on Google Docs, seeing each other's pictures up in the corner. I don't know if you've ever shared, but
yep,
it was like being with your best friend when you're trapped. And so we would say, like, take me to Troy.
See you in Troy.
See you in Troy. And it was our battle cry.
I love that so much. That is so awesome. So on that note, were there specific characters that you both wrote, or did you both write them all together at different times? Or were you like, you're Cassandra, you're Andromache, I'll take Rhea and Helen? How did you guys divide and conquer, so to speak?
So we thought it was going to be a certain way, and then it ended up being different. We both created 2 voices, but we're never going to say who wrote what, because the truth is, at the end of the day, we don't really even know anymore. And we wrote this, we wanted to write it as one voice, and we've known each other long enough and have read each other's, like, we wanted it to feel like one person had written it. And so we each gave birth, I think, to 2 of the voices, but then we have different strengths, even as writers. And so at the end, the characters just came alive and told us what they needed. So there are some parts that I'm like, that is Ashley at her best. There are some parts that I'm like, oh, that you see me there. And there are some scenes, parts of the story where our words are literally bricks that we're layering. And to do that with somebody, we would never, I mean, I know there are a few other, like some husband and wife author teams that write from one perspective. And so we imagine their process might be similar, but it is incredible trust fall. And it was just our relationship with each other and how long we've known, and the love and trust that we have for each other, that our story, the art creation of art started to mimic like what we were actually talking about, which is all these things coming together. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. That is incredible and so special to find. I love that. Okay. My next question is, Horses of Fire delves really deep into like ancient Hittite culture and Anatolian culture. And this is what really brings the Trojans to life for me in Horses of Fire. Just like all the details woven about their customs and like the gods and their religions and things like that were just like, wow, like I feel like these are real people now. It's not just like Greeks fighting Greeks. It's like this is a unique culture in and of itself that's facing extinction. So was Hittite and Anatolian history always part of your vision, or did that work itself in like as the story developed later? Like were you like, oh, this is this cool thing that I learned today, let's weave that in? Like what was that process like for you guys?
Yeah, I think we always wanted our retelling to be more historical in nature. So we wanted, to focus on the human actors and not the gods as the ones who determine the outcome of the war. But I think that the deep dive into Hittite and Anatolian history was something that did gradually develop. Like we definitely wanted to tell the Trojan side of the story, and we knew that in the Iliad there's it being composed by Greeks, there's not that much culturally that distinguishes the Trojans in the Iliad itself. Like they do kind of just seem like another version of the Greeks. And we're like, no, who were these actual people? What cultures? And there's still a lot of debate around this. But the Luwians are put forth as one culture to look at when thinking about who the Trojans were. And so we really wanted to explore that, and that opened all these different doors. Like, yes, they have their own pantheon. It was the sense that it became more and more fascinating the more we started digging. And we became very, very excited about like, oh, we could tell this instead of just telling the story through a Greek lens. We could try to tell it through the lens of Anatolian history. And then also, just the Bronze Age collapse was a really interesting concept and unique backdrop that we thought would maybe add a slightly apocalyptic feel to the story. The sense that this war, if it was a war that actually occurred in history, and then the legend, the myth became based off of that actual war, that it wasn't necessarily just about the fate of Troy, but that it would have had ripple effects that would have, affected many civilizations from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. And we thought that would be a really interesting way to take the conflict even up another notch by kind of setting it in that context of the late Bronze Age collapse. So I don't know, Danielle, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that was great. I think there was a reason this story is the one that has been passed down for so long. And it's because of what it represented to the people who dedicated their lives to memorizing these lines and passing them down before Homer even wrote them down. And the reason for that, like the reason is what really fascinated us. And our backgrounds are not in classics. Like we approach it from a different angle. Our backgrounds are in history, theology, and international relations, political science. And so these are the things that we wanted to look at it through that angle. And yeah, history is written by the victors. We see it again and again. And that is 100% the case here. And we wanted to imagine what would the history look like if it had been written by those who were vanquished instead of those who had emerged victorious, even though nobody really is victorious, which is the lesson of Troy in a way. All these civilizations collapse. And why?
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think you really nailed that especially when you were weaving in all of the allies of Troy, which when I read the Iliad, it's not really clear who these people are or where they came from. And I love how you guys expanded on that. And it's like, yeah, no, it's not just like a couple surrounding neighborhoods. Like, this is countries on all sides, people sending allies to Troy to defend it. And I loved how you wove that in, because, yeah, the collapse of that definitely feels more final and real from that perspective too. So cool. Absolutely love that. Okay, my next question is, what historical facts did you discover in your research that you were not able to include, but you really wanted to?
There's a lot. If you're a political science nerd, like the two of us basically are, like you said, the civilizations and the interplay and the power struggles between them. Like, a fascinating thing for us was that the Trojans, and we based our Troy on the site of Hissarlik and the archaeological remains. Like, even our map is drawn from those remains. Like, we obviously elaborated a little bit, but if we have a location, and Troy is on the cross lines of the Mycenaeans and the Hittites, and there was a version where the Mycenaeans, the Greeks, and the Trojans were actually allies in a previous war against the Hittites. And then all these things sort of collapsed, and that there was like trade embargoes, that there's no Mycenaean pottery in the Hittite realm because they had maybe put on the first like embargo. Like, we're not taking any pottery from, because you're our enemies. The first treaties came from this time. Like, all these incredible things about how the interplay of these powers, and that Troy had to choose her allies very carefully because she was in danger of being erased by both, was something we wish we could have even shown more, but we hinted at it. We pulled back. You're welcome. We pulled back just because it was the people at the end of the day
Right.
that were the most important. But all these things were there, and the fact that this world was so similar in many ways to the environment that we live in now. So the interconnectedness of their trade, of the movement of these people, the fact that there was global climate change events happening at this time. There were you go down a list, and it's like, we have so much to learn. Save the ancient studies. We have so much to learn from this time period.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Are you back? Are you frozen?
I'm back.
Yes.
Okay. The last thing I heard was, it's so much fun to learn, and then it got a little warbly.
That's okay. We can learn we can learn from what they did, and that's like the relevance of ancient history to today. Like, there are we should be learning from the past, and that's the end of my little soapbox speech.
I want
nobody heard.
Ashley. Awesome. So,
yeah, I was
go ahead. Go ahead.
Ashley's got probably something to add. That.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can work it into the next question. That works.
Okay, so the next question is, was there anything really surprising that you discovered in your research that challenged your assumptions going in?
Yeah, so I think, often everything Danielle just said, I mean, that was surprising, because I think that was a new area of history for us to explore. And then also, again, seeing the relevance to our contemporary time was really exciting, and we weren't necessarily expecting that. And then also, I think when we think of our current moment of, all these amazing feminist retellings of ancient myths, and showcasing, forgotten women in the original stories. But what's always been interesting us about the Iliad is we always felt that the female characters were compelling presences on the page. In the originals, we didn't have to create that. Maybe they didn't get as many lines, and maybe we have like certain issues with how they've been interpreted over the centuries, like such as Helen being blamed for the war. But it wasn't as if Homer gave us, these flat women with no depth, and we had to go back in there and revive them. It felt like they already existed. They were always there. And so I think that was what was interesting to us, is the more we looked into the history of women in this period, it wasn't just, we found that there were some examples of women with extreme, agency and power in a way that maybe they actually lost in later centuries, but have had during the Bronze Age. So, for example, we based Andromache on Queen Puduhepa, who was a Hittite queen who ruled alongside her husband, had significant power. I mean, her royal seal is on one of the first known treaties. And, so her relationship with Hector, it didn't feel like we were taking a modern interpretation and putting it on Andromache. We actually were like, no, there's a Bronze Age example of this. So we weren't just adding like a modern feminist gloss, like it was already there. And that was really, really exciting for us to see. And then again, we can find it in Homer too. Like there's a line in the Iliad that talks about how Hector listened to his wife's counsel. And so we thought like, like he's the general of the army. Like what kind of counsel is she giving him? And that kind of led to the idea of having her being raised to be a military strategist, thanks to mentoring by Amazons, which is also exciting to learn that archaeologists have discovered remains of, female nomadic tribes around the Black Sea. So maybe Amazons weren't just a myth. So that's, things like that were really exciting to learn that history doesn't move like in a straight line, and that the roles of women in the past, like we didn't have to add things to make it feel relevant to a contemporary female reader. Like there's evidence there already.
I absolutely love that. And I love the conflict that you wove in with Andromache and like the old blood of the city, and just like that kind of like intercultural, marriage struggles that are, common today and relevant today to people. I loved how you wove that in, and like her own personal struggles and, trying to stay true to who she was and, go with her gut instinct. But she had all of this like social pressure and social things that she was dealing with, like obstacles in her way. I loved how you developed her character around that. It really made it feel real and made her a more real character, and really sold the authenticity of the military background that you crafted for her. So I really like that a lot. What was the biggest obstacles you both faced in writing this story?
Yeah, so the biggest obstacle was, and it's something that we learned, as we already mentioned, writing was not the problem. It was the going back and breaking this giant book that we had written into two, which is what it needed to. So we planned it really as one story. And if you read from the beginning to the end, which we would love for people to do, like you will see that it is definitely, we're telling. And so when we did decide to break it into two, the most of our work came in creating an ending for the first book, for Horses of Fire, that was going to give you a taste of the ending that we envisioned for the whole story. And so that for us, it was the planning and the restructuring. So Daughters of Bronze was written and done and dusted before Horses of Fire found its final form. And when you're writing something that is that big, another struggle that we had was technological, because there is only so much that Google Docs can handle. And we broke that thing so many times. The panic emails to each other when we couldn't even get in because the file had locked us out and everything was starting to corrupt. So we are still waiting for someone to design a collaborative, some collaborative system for co-authors who write epic novels. We would, if anybody's out there, you have an audience, so you have customers here, because we definitely pushed Google Docs to the limits.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. Google even falls victim to to Greek oppression.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so I'm an author too, and so this is just kind of a curiosity question. How many words did you have originally? And then like how many did you end up with? Did you ever just as a vanity like check in?
Yeah.
We gave very little thought. We were writing the story that we wanted to write, and it was going to be what it was. But actually, we ended up with more words. I think our original draft was 160, 170,000 words, and then we divided into two, and that let us do is flesh out some of those other things. So it ended up being perfect because we were able to bring more to the story as opposed to less. Ashley, do you remember our original word count?
I mean, I think when it was one novel, it was pushing on 200,000 words, and our agent was like, "No," like so. But they still ended up being two, epic, hefty books. But it was the best decision to be able to give each of the storylines and all the side characters that breathing room, and to bring in all the different elements we've been discussing. So, but it was a big book.
Yeah. Are there any plans to like combine the two into one volume later as like a I don't know, like a special edition, anything like that? Or is your publisher planning to keep them both separate forever? This is just a curiosity question.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. We haven't heard anything, but like a box set or something would be really cool. Like
that'd be our dream.
That'd be our dream. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe with like some special edition, like maps and character art and stuff. That would be really cool. Yeah.
It would be.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Well, cool. So let me look and see if we have any questions in our chat. I don't see any questions in here, but do you guys have anything additional that you want to share about either your writing process or the story itself or anything like that? Anything that comes to mind that you really feel passionate about?
I mean, I think your questions were amazing. So you touched on all of our major passion points. But I think, just kind of what we've been hammering home, like the stories do belong together. So we're so excited that the second half is about to be published, because we would love nothing, we would love for nothing more than readers to be able to just read the whole thing straight through, because that was the original vision. But we're also, very proud of the two individual books they ended up being as well. So you won't lose any, well, you'll lose a little bit, but you won't, you'll still enjoy the experience reading them separately, individually. But it was fun to be able to talk with you about how we conceived of them as one big giant story, because that was definitely the original vision.
Do you guys have any projects that you are working on together now, or how are you letting it rest a little bit?
We're always working. So we have two different things that we're kind of working on at this moment. And they're very different, but they're both in the line as, what could have been, like what is and what could be happening behind the scenes. But they're two very different time periods. And so, yeah, we're always working.
So more we have ideas for other historical stories, and then that's kind of the common thread, is like, here's the outcome everybody knows, what could have been, and that's, I think, the unifying thread, even if we jump time periods.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. How did you guys feel about cutting out most of the Greek perspective? I think the only major Greek character we really got to see a lot of was Ajax, which I loved. I love his character in the Iliad, and I loved how you guys rendered it into the modern retelling. But like, what was that decision process like? Just completely cutting out them. Like, did you think about weaving in anything from them, or was it always like, nope, this is a Trojan story?
It was always going to be a Trojan story, but it's also a story about war, which is really just a story about people. And at the end of the day, the thing we wanted to show is that there's not that much difference between the men and women who fight these wars mostly, and that we wanted to bring humanity to both sides. But there are people that have told the story of Troy from the Greek perspective and that have done a beautiful job. Like, we didn't need to touch Achilles and Patroclus. Madeline Miller, like, it was beautiful. Like, there's no need, but I think we were interested in all the stories that had gotten lost. And, that the fact that some of these civilizations that we were trying to introduce readers to have been lost for thousands of years. They're just being rediscovered. And there's so much unexplored territory. And I think we were interested in that more than anything.
Yeah, I will add to that. I think Odysseus was maybe the one character that we were thinking like it would be really cool to show him through, Andromache as a strategist, through Rhea as the spy on the ground. So her cleverness matched up against his, through Helen having actually having known him back in Mycenae. So like having him come alive, even though you don't see his perspective, through these other characters because of the traits that they each share with him.
I was going to comment on that. I really loved how you did that. Like, we almost never had an actual conversation with him, but just the presence that he had every time he was talked about was chilling. And I loved how you guys did that. So that was really cool. I really liked that. I had another question and it just flew away from me.
Happens to us all the time.
It was right there.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you. While you think of that, we forgot to say at the beginning, thank you all so much for having us here. It's, we were so excited to come in and good company here.
Well, you were kind of warbly there, but
I feel like the computer knows when I'm going off and it's like, nope, we're good.
But I'm picking up what you're putting down. We are so thrilled to have you guys on. I've been looking forward to doing a book club with you guys for several months, ever since I finished Horses of Fire. So yeah, just thank you guys so much for coming on. This has been a really awesome discussion. You've answered a lot of my curiosity questions that I had, and I'm really excited to see if you guys, hatch out another retelling maybe of another story that I really love, which is the Aeneid. I would love for you guys to retell that one, and so we can see a little bit more of Rhea and Syrian and see how, how Aeneas. There's so many questions I have about the Aeneid, and some of Aeneas's thought processes, and like, why are you doing that, dude? I would love to see what your take would be, and to have his story continue, because we really didn't get a lot of him in this story. So we got a little sprinkling. So it would be really cool to see where the story goes.
That possibility was always there in our mind. So it was kind of like, let's introduce Aeneas and give some, a little taste, but we would love that too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we would love nothing more than to do that. There's a lot to tell there too.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Well, whatever question I had, it has not come back to me. It has not come back to me. I should have written it down. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for coming on. We have had a lot of viewers, so thank you guys, everybody who has watched and participated. Please feel free to go check out Horses of Fire. It is available on our bookshop. And bookshop.org, I don't know how they do it, but their prices are always lower than everybody else's, and they still support independent bookstores and organizations like SASA as well, if you purchase the book through our online bookshop. So check it out. It is amazing. And I will say that I have already read Daughters of Bronze, which drops in November, and I loved it. So I highly, highly, highly recommend reading Horses of Fire, because Daughters of Bronze will not disappoint. So check it out, everyone. Add it to your TBR. Thank you guys so much again for joining. And I can't wait to discuss Daughters of Bronze with you guys sometime in the future.
Thank you, MJ. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, MJ. Yeah, we love the work you're doing here. So awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.